So let's move on to the exposure to the price of an individual stock. Some exchanges do trade futures contracts on selected individual stocks, but in most of the time, a position in an individual stock can only be hedged using a stock index futures contract. And hedging an exposure to the price of an individual stock using index futures contracts is quite similar to hedging a well-diversified stock portfolio. The number of index futures contracts that the hedger should short is given by beta multiplied by P divided by F, why beta is the beta of the stock, P is the total value of the shares owned, and F is the current value of one index futures contract. It is very important to note that although the number of contracts entered into is calculated in the same way as that when a portfolio of stocks is being hedged, the performance of the hedge is a little bit worse. The hedge provides protection only against the risks arising from market movements, and this risk is relatively smaller than the total risk in the price movements of individual stock. And hedge is only appropriate when investor feels that the stock will outperform the market, but he is not very sure about the performance of the market. And take a look at this example. Consider an investor who in June holds 20,000 IBM shares and each share values $100, and the investor feels that the market will be very volatile over the next month, but IBM will outperform, and he decides to use the August futures contracts on the S&P 500 to hedge the position during the 1-month period. And the beta of IBM is estimated to be 1.1. The current futures price for the August contract on the S&P 500 is 900. And each contract is for delivery of $250 times the index. And firstly, we will calculate the total value of the shares owned by multiplying the IBM shares by 100, which is the share value. And here's the result, $2 million. Secondly, we calculate the F. F is the current value of one index futures contract. We multiply the current futures price for the August contract by the amount times index, which is $250. Okay, so we have F equals $225,000. And to calculate the number of contracts should be shorted, we multiply the beta 1.1 by P divided by F, and we round this result to 10 contracts. So hedger should short 10 contracts. And suppose IBM rises to $125 during the month, and the futures price of the S&P 500 rises to 1,080. We can calculate that the end investor will therefore gain IBM shares multiply by $125 minus $100. So he will gain $500,000 on IBM, and he will lose $450,000 on futures contracts. And from this example, the hedge offsets again on the underlying asset with a loss on futures contracts. The offset might seem to be counterproductive, but it cannot be emphasized often enough that the purpose of the hedge is to reduce risks. In a hedge tends to make unfavorable outcomes less unfavorable, but also to make favorable outcomes less favorable. And the next part will be presented by Tang.